This is a strategy for connecting information across a text to make the logic of that information really obvious for the reader. It's called cohesive connectives. There are different types of connectives. We can join clauses, and there's a type of connective we use for that. We can also join sentences. However, the type of connective we use for that is different. And we're going to focus in on that second type of connective, which can be used to join sentences or longer chunks of text. We're going to call them cohesive connectives just so that we have a label to distinguish them from other types. So how does this strategy work? You ask yourself 3 questions. What 2 pieces of information need to be connected? What's the logical relationship between those pieces of information? And third, which connective will work best in this context to express that relationship? Sounds straightforward, but I've often seen students struggle with identifying the logical relationship between the pieces of information, so don't skip that step. Let's take a look at some logical relations. Here are 4 common ones. They're not the only ones. They're 4 of the most common. We can add something, and we're going to use symbols here so that we can use them in our modeling a little bit later on in this video. We can show sequence in time. We can show cause. Or we can compare something with something else. Let's take a look at a very simple model first. From the children's story, The 3 Little Pigs, the brick house was much stronger than the straw house or the stick house. The wolf could not blow it down. So what 2 pieces of information need to be connected? In this case, it's quite simple, those 2 sentences. What's the logical relationship between those 2 pieces of information? Well, it's the strength of the house, of the strength of the brick house, that causes the wolf to not be able to blow it down. So it's a cause and effect. We're going to put a little cause and effect arrow in there to show that. And then which connective will work best in this context to express that relationship? Here's 3 possibilities. Therefore, consequently, as a result, any of them could work. I'm going to choose consequently this time, and we have the brick house was much stronger than the straw house or the stick house. Consequently, the wolf could not blow it down. Let's look at a slightly more complex example, this one taken from a health website, describing R0 value, or the reproduction value, the speed with which an illness reproduces. Let's read it through first. The diseases that are transmitted the fastest and easiest are the ones that travel through the air, such as the flu or measles. Physical contact with a person who has such a disease isn't needed to transmit it. You can contract the flu from breathing near someone who has the flu, even if you never touch them. Diseases that are transmitted through bodily fluids, such as Ebola or HIV, aren't as easy to contract or transmit. This is because you need to come into contact with infected blood, saliva, or other bodily fluids to contract them. Airborne illnesses tend to have a higher R0 value than those spread through direct contact. So, what 2 pieces of information need to be connected here? I mean, the passage is pretty connected. But it's not quite as obvious how this first section about diseases that are transmitted through the air, exactly what the connection is to this second section about diseases transmitted through bodily fluids. So this time we're connecting longer chunks of text. What's the logical relationship between those 2 pieces of information? In this case, we're comparing those 2 types of diseases, transmitted through the air or transmitted through bodily fluids. Which connective might work to express that relationship? In this context, is some possibilities. Alternatively, in contrast, conversely. They're not really alternatives, so alternatively doesn't work. We're actually contrasting different cases. So in contrast or conversely would work. And we're going to put that connective in here to connect those 2 sections. Notice when we use these cohesive connectives, we need a capital letter because they're often, not always, but often used at the beginning of a sentence, and they're followed by a comma to separate them from the sentence. So just remember when using this strategy, connectives for joining clauses are different from those that join sentences or longer chunks of text. Cohesive connectives often come at the beginning of a sentence, though not always, and if they do, they're separated from the rest of the sentence by a comma. Don't skip steps until you become very fluent with this strategy. If you're using the how-to sheet that I've provided, there's a link in that sheet to a bank of connectives which will show you, using these different kinds of logical relationships, some possibilities for you to use in